Hi, my dear lovely students. How are you? Welcome to the session. In this video, we are going to discuss about odd one out questions. So at times when we discuss this question type, usually the thought that comes in the mind of students is that the four terms are provided and there's one term that is different from the rest of the terms. Like a simple mathematical example, if I give, I say 4, 16, and 9 and 26. So you'll say, ma'am, 4, 16, and 9 are squares, 26 is not. So 26 is the odd one out, right? So this is one way to present odd one out questions. Of course, this question can occur in verbal ability also. But in this video, we are going to discuss the odd one out questions where you are provided with five sentences. Out of those five sentences, four can be arranged to form a meaningful paragraph. One sentence will not fit in the context, and we need to identify that. So, yes, these questions are far more trickier, and more or less, you're solving parajumble and odd one out together. So, you need to have great ability to comprehend the information. And the most interesting part is that the statement which will be the final answer, that means that will not fit in the context, looks very similar to rest of the sentences, and most of the times the topic of discussion also remains to be the same. So how do we tackle these questions, and what is the right strategy to approach, that we are going to learn in this video, and then we are going to practice a lot of questions so that you get clarity, and we are keeping the difficulty level of questions high so that you really enjoy the session. So let's get started. My name is Juhi Narula. So, first important thing that we are going to discuss is the strategy. Now, if you have seen some of my videos, I'm sure you have seen. So, I am one trainer who would really emphasize that there should be a strategic approach even to the questions of verbal. If you are not applying the right approach to verbal ability questions, then you are actually putting yourself in deep trouble. And no matter how good we are with the other sections, that can be data interpretation or quants or reasoning, but if we are not able to perform well in verbal ability, that definitely is a big no no, and that hampers our final chances for the selection. Be it cat, if you're wanting a good percentile without scoring well in verbal ability, you can't. Now if you say that the weightage is of the scores remains to be less in the overall selection process, but still you need to have that percentile to reach to the interviews, right? So, and that's applicable for the other sections also. There are sectional cutoffs in some of the exams, and there are exclusive verbal ability sections. So when we talk about verbal ability, most of us really suffer because we have no approach in our mind, right? We are just randomly approaching the questions, solving the questions, reaching to the answers without great analysis, without putting a thought that what can be the right method. We always have a method, right? When we are solving a time, speed, and distance question, I've got an approach, I've got a formula, I've got a thought process, right? Or maybe when I'm talking about mixtures and allegations, I've got an idea how to deal with these questions, or be it profit and loss, right? So every time when we are dealing with quant questions, we have a strategic approach. We know the short tricks, we know how to do quick calculations, we know the tables. But when we come to verbal, maybe yes, we will put some effort in learning the words, but otherwise we'll just keep on randomly practicing. If it's a good day, we might get a good score. If it's a bad day, you know, we might not get a good score in mock. But let not the good day and bad day define your success, right? We can't be dependent on luck to go for the final exam, right? So that is the reason I strongly believe that no strategic approach. So that is the reason I really put in a lot of thought in creating RC approaches, which we have discussed. So you can watch those videos, and you can watch the other videos where initial few minutes I will definitely dedicate. The idea should always be, and I am sure you'll absolutely agree on this point. Let me just write it for you. uh, so I always believe that the idea to approach verbal is first learn the approach or the strategy, right? So if you are not strategically very strong, you would not be able to see through it, right? Second is that you give enough time to imbibe the approach, right? Imbibe the approach, right? Absorb the approach. So this is the second step. Then the third step would be that you basically try to get a perfect accuracy, and then you manage time, right? and then maybe you take pressure also and you do a lot of mocks. So this is the approach to progress. What happens is that we would not just perform any of these steps and you would want to focus on accuracy in time, or there are some students who would just straight away give a lot of mocks. So without performing 1 2 3 4 5, you would not be able to go to the main exam. So that's where you go to the exam, right? So that's the step, that's the algo, that's a logic, that's the thought process that you need to follow, right? So let's learn the approach, and let us learn the approach for all the questions. Initially, yes, it is difficult. So there were sessions where teachers in our junior classes, when I was a kid, used to teach us Vedic mathematics, and I used to feel what a time waste it is. I know the calculations, doing the multiplying here, adding there, subtracting here, with lot of unnecessary jhanjat baji. That's what we used to think. I'll be able to do it quickly, but students who actually learned the approach really got benefited, right? This is from the personal experience that I'm telling, that gives some time to imbibe the approach, and it takes time. It's a skill set that you're acquiring, right? Otherwise, if just after the session you would have got a right understanding and you would be getting tremendous accuracy, won't you think so that we will just ask you, okay, 10 days, 10 classes, and go for the test? But people take an year, people take 6 months, people take 3 months, depending on what level of understanding they have of the subject. Why then this much of time is needed, right? You attend a 10 hours video session, see the solutions, and then go for the exam if you're that ready, right? But we need time because it's skill set that we are acquiring, and it varies from person to person. Like, I learned to drive car in 3 months. My brother learned it in just 10 days, right? So everybody has got a different pace, and we need to accept that. But the objective should be that I learn how to tackle the car, right? And then I will take it on the highway. Now what do? We don't know the approach, and we start solving mocks, right? And then we start practicing, and when we are practicing we would want an output or an accuracy, and that's not coming. Why? Because we don't know how to deal with it. So please keep this in mind. Don't attempt verbal questions without having a strategic approach, right? So let's come to the topic and see what should be the right approach to solve the odd one out questions. So first is, since I told you how the question looks like, there are five statements and there would be one statement that will not fit in the context, right? Rest of the four statements you can arrange to form a meaningful paragraph. So it's a sort of para jumble question, right? So you see these questions very commonly asked in CAT, right? So these are para jumbles plus reasoning, that's how you can pick it. And of course, comprehension. So any question and verbal that's having few sentences would definitely demand that you understand the data, you understand the information, you imbibe the information, and then only you can solve. So if you have attended a parajumble session, I think you'll find it really easy to solve odd one out questions. But to take you through the concept again, let's see that what can be the right approach to solve the odd one out questions, right? First is try to understand the context. So it's very important that you understand that without knowing what the information is talking about, what the passage is trying to convey, you cannot solve, right? So what do students do? They comprehend wala part, they would just bypass and they would just start reasoning. So don't do that. Do it parallelly, read and reason out parallelly, but ensure that you're putting your focus in rightly understanding what the context is about, right? Then look for the opening or the closing statements. So this is another very useful strategy that we tell our students to apply in parajumbles also. Look for an opening statement. So an opening statement is usually a broad statement. So what would be the structure like? So in usually parajumbles, if you're arranging four statements, the first would be a broad statement that would begin the discussion. As you will progress, the discussion will narrow down, right? It will become more precise. It will reach to the conclusion. So that's what the usual structure is. So when we are looking for an opening statement, we look for a broad statement, and closing statement will usually act as a conclusion. So you can say it's most of the times a conclusion. So you can look for words like hence, therefore, as a result, so that you are able to understand that the author is trying to bring the discussion to an end. Then the next is look for mandatory pair. Mandatory is essential. So what do we mean by mandatory pair? There are two statements that will go hand in hand. The pair, right? So look for the combinations, maybe two statements talking about cause and effect, or a problem and a solution, or pros and cons. So look for these two statements that you think will be really important to be together. So if you know an opening statement, you know one mandatory pair, then if it is a four sentence para jumble, then placing that one sentence that is remaining would not be very difficult, right? Say for instance, I'm just giving you an example. There's so four sentences that you need to rearrange. Now you have come to this conclusion that D is my opening statement, and there is this B and A, which is a mandatory pair. So if D is an opening statement and BA is the mandatory pair, then what all combinations we have? We have two combinations working. Either it comes DCBA and DBAC. So we can just figure out. Then our job is really becoming easy. So look for mandatory pairs. I've told you. You know how to go for mandatory pairs. Look for statements that show some association with each other, right? It's a great clue, it's a phenomenal clue, and I am one trainer who would definitely recommend to observe transition words and practically all the verbal ability questions. So words like hence, as a result, like I've already discussed, are conclusion indicators. Similarly, furthermore, moreover, in addition to, yet, but, nonetheless, in spite, despite. These are very strong clues that help us establish mandatory pairs and help us understand how the discussion is flowing. So do pay attention to these words and wherever possible, right? So this is one mantra that you can apply to practically all the verbal ability questions. Now, look for pronoun clues. What are pronouns? Pronouns are replacers. Replacers are words that you use instead of nouns. So if I'm saying he's an intelligent boy, then this statement cannot begin the discussion because you'll ask, ma'am, what is he referring to? Right? So we would definitely want a proper noun. Shobit lives in USA. He is a hardworking boy, right? So that's where the sentence would make sense to you. So usually the sentences that have got pronouns do not begin the discussion, right? And if there is a pronoun, you would be looking for a statement that helps us understand that what the pronoun is pointing to. So do pay attention to these clues so that it becomes easy for you to set association between the sentences. Next is the sentence which looks difficult to be accommodated. So you are seeing, I have told you how to arrange the paragraphs, right? How to rearrange the sentences. So if you know that this particular rearrangement works for me, then the statement out of the given which is not fitting in any of these criteria or is not finding the right placement would be the odd one out. Now this is again an important suggestion. The subject matter is very similar, so of course they're not going to give you a statement which looks drastically different. Otherwise this question will become easy. So you have to be careful and you have to be cautious, especially with those particular odd one out questions where there's a paragraph like the one we are discussing, because the subject matter would be very similar. So students do get swayed towards incorrect answer choices. So be sure that it is not fitting the context and then you put it out, right? So these are few suggestions. I'll give you 1 minute, quickly reread the points and jot them down in your notebooks. Very important, because whenever you practice, just take a look at the strategies again and then solve. So subconsciously you will be able to absorb the strategies. And trust me on this, students do tell me that, ma'am, when we'll apply the strategies, is it going to consume a lot of time? Initially while you are practicing, yes, but if you really practice hard, no, it would not at all require any extra time in your exam. Rather, it will save a lot of your time, right? So do read these points and then we will proceed further. So let's further proceed. And here are the questions in front of you. Now you know the rules. The sentences are there. So the direction is also there. Let me read the direction for you. Five jumbled up sentences related to a topic are given below. Right? So you can see A, B, C, D, E. Five statements are there. Four of them can be put together to form a coherent paragraph. Coherent paragraph means a meaningful paragraph where the ideas can be combined together to convey information. Identify the odd one out and key in the number of the sentence would be your answer. That means if you're identifying C as that statement which is not fitting the context, C would be the answer, right? So I'm sure you're clear with the direction. This direction would be applicable to all the questions that we are going to solve in this session. So I'll give you 1 minute, quickly try solving this and then we are going to discuss. Please start solving. So let's discuss. Machine learning models are prone to learning human like biases. Biases are interests or where there is, likeliness from the training data that feed these algorithms. So are you able to understand that these is a demonstrative or a adjective or a pronoun? So these would be not the right word to have in the opening statement, right? But then we are understanding that what the discussion is, machine learning models are inclined to human like biases. So that's what the sentence is trying to convey. Hate speech detection is a part of ongoing effort against oppressive and abusive language on social media. Okay, so looks like a opening statement, and let's see how the discussion is built. The current automatic detection models miss out on something vital: context. Okay, it uses algorithms to flag racist or violent speech faster and better than human beings alone. For instance, algorithms struggle to determine if group identifiers like gay or black are used in offensive or prejudiced way because they are trained on imbalanced data sets with unusually high rate of hate speech. So if you're able to see how this biasing is working, and then this talks about the algorithm. So this is talking about algorithm. Now this statement also talks about algorithm. This is again an example of how the algorithm is. So we can definitely say that A, D, and E are related, right? So we are just trying to put the sentences together. Now we have two choices. Either B can be that particular statement that's not fitting in the context, and C is uh, another statement, right? So if you are going to check B, this says hate speech detection is a part of the ongoing effort against oppressive and abusive languages on social media, right? So how it is being functioned, then rest of the statements are saying. Now, this is basically saying that what it lacks and how the algorithm is driven. But what it is missing is something that's being not discussed, right? So out of the given sentences, C is the odd one out that is not fitting in the paragraph's discussion, right? I hope it makes sense. Let's move to the next question. To try this, and then we are going to discuss. We'll do one thing. We'll try to solve the parajumble also for this question. So while you are trying this, try to find the odd one out and rearrange the other sentences also. So let's discuss. Stat signals something measurable while Matic advertised free labor, but drone above all indicated control. So you need to have this word that's talking about the discussion. Now we have understanding that they're talking about stat, matic, throne, right? It was a totem of high modernism. So if you are going to see again, it cannot be in starting statement, right? It was a totem of high modernism, the intellectual and cultural mode that decreed no process or phenomenon that was too complex to be grasped, managed and optimized. Okay, like the heraldic shields of ancient knights, these morphemes, again you see this cannot be an opening statement, right, were painted onto the name of scientific technologies to proclaim is to claim, right, uh, show power, one's history and achievements to friends and enemies alike. The historian Robert Proctor at Stanford University calls the suffix "tron" along with matic and stat embodied symbols. So if you will see these, compare these statements, 4 is a good broad statement, right? It is making the discussion, right, making the first statement of the discussion. It is helping at first how the name came into picture. And then if you are going to see the rest of the statements, if you are going to read, let's see. To gain the suffix was to acquire a proud and optimistic emblem of the electronic and atomic age. So if you are going to see, um, how do I fit in the other statements? Like heraldic shields, so these morphemes are painted onto the names of scientific technology, right? So these symbols were the morphemes. So if you can see, 4 and 3 show good association, right? And 1 and 5 again form a mandatory pair. Now, out of these two mandatory pairs that we have, 4 will be a good opening statement. So the correct combination that can fit in will be 4315. Now, how there was no process or phenomenon that was too complex to be grasped, managed, and optimized. It was a totem of high modernism, intellectual and cultural mood. This is not what the context is talking about. So, this statement is irrelevant to the discussion. Hence, to pick the odd one out, we'll have 2 as the final answer, right? I hope we are sorted with this question. So, please go through the combination again. Take another minute and see 4315. Does it make sense to you? And 2 would be the odd one out statement. Quickly see this and then we are going to move to the next one. Great. So I'm sure you're sorted. Let's try this question. Very interesting question. You're going to really have fun doing this. So do it. Here, this word has come under the bulb. So this is read, right? And this is canon. Okay, literary canon. So try this and then we are going to discuss. Very interesting discussion. I'm sure you're going to enjoy solving this. So let's discuss. For feminists, the question of how we read is inextricably linked with the question of what we read. Okay. Ilan Showalter's critique of the literary curriculum is exemplary of this work. Okay, this work. So let's see. And do androcentric literature structures the reading experience differently depending on the gender of the reader. Okay. The documentation of this realization, one of the earliest tasks under the feminist critics. More specifically, the feminist inquiry into the activity of reading begins with the realization that literary canon is androcentric and that this has a profoundly damaging effect on women readers. So, if you're going to see 3 D, and very easily E also, uh, and to some extent, if you are going to understand this, B as well. These four statements are showing association, and how androcentric literature structures depending on gender of the reader. That's not what is relevant to the context. The context is talking about that how feminists would consider the thought process. Like A would say, statement A, for a feminist the question of how we read is linked to the question, so what is my understanding, what is my thought process of reading is dependent on the question of what am I reading, right? And the documentation of this realization was earliest task undertaken by feminist critics. So we will see more specifically the feminist inquiry into the activity of reading begins with the realization that literary canon is androcentric. So C might look like, somewhere linked with E, but if you will see, the entire story is what is the feminist take on it, right? So other gender, the masculine gender, like what C is throwing at the end, is not something which fits into the overall discussion about feminism, right? So I hope we are sorted with this question. So let's move to the next one. Try this. Very interesting. I'm sure you're going to enjoy solving it. Take a minute, try this, and then we are going to discuss. So let's discuss. Talk was the most common way for enslaved men and women to subvert the rules of their bondage to gain more agency that they were supposed to have. Okay, so it's talking about how talk speaking was a common way to subvert the rules, right? Even in conditions of extreme violence and unfreedom, their word remained ubiquitous, ephemeral, irrepressible, and potentially transgressive. So speech is associated, so definitely A and B show relation. Slaves come from societies in which oaths, orations, and invocations carried great potency. So, potency stands for power. Okay. So, POT, this is the root, and this has got two meanings, or rather, two usages. I'm sure you must have heard this potable drinking water, something which is suitable. Don't confuse it with potable. Potable is easy to carry, and I'm writing portable. These are two different words, right? Similar sounding homonyms, but different in meaning. So POT also stands for power. Potency is power, and also it stands for drinking water. Anyways, coming back to it. So, okay, how slaves come, right? So this is talking about how speech works for slaves and from where slaves comes. So this is basically the origin that's being considered. Come to D, freedom of speech and the power to silence may have preeminent markers of white liberty in colonies, but at the same time, slavery depended on dialogue. Slaves could never be completely muted. Muted means kept under control, not given the power to speak. So, if you're able to see this, this is again freedom of speech and speech so related. So, yeah, this also looks associated to the context. Slave owners obsessed. Obsessed means they were strongly thinking about it over slave talk, though they could never control it, yet feared its power to bind and inspire. For as everyone knew, oaths, whispers, and secret conversations bred means gave birth to conspiracy, and revolt is going against. So what talk would lead to? So if you're able to understand, A, B, D, E clearly show that how slaves and their power to speak or power of speech or how did they communicate it, that's being discussed. Origin is something which is not the discussions agenda. So if you have to pick the odd one out statement, it will definitely be C. So I hope you are sorted. I'll give you entire 1 minute to redo it, do it, and then we are going to move to the next question. Please try it again. So I'm sure we are sorted. Let's try this question. Very interesting. I'm sure you're going to enjoy solving it. Try it and then we are going to discuss. Okay, let's discuss. So translators are like bumblebees. Okay, so they're trying to create an analogy between translators and bumblebees. That's what this statement gives an indication. Though long since scientifically disapproved, this factoid is routinely trotted about. Trotted about means talked about, discussed about. Okay. Now, which factoid? Let's see. Similar pronouncements about the impossibility of translation as Dodge practitioners since Leonardo Bruni de Interpretation Recta published in 1424. Okay, let's see. Similar pronouncements about the impossibility. Let's see. Bees, unaware of these deliberations, have continued to flit from flower to flower, and translators continue to translate. So, this is somehow trying that how bees and translators show relationship in their behavior. Let's come to in 1934, the French entomologist Auguste Magnin pronounced the flight of bumblebee to be aerodynamically impossible. Okay. And similar pronouncements about impossibility of translations have Dodge practice. So similar pronouncements. See, this is impossible. Are you able to create the mandatory pair for yourself? Similar pronouncements about impossible of translation of Dodge practitioners. So again, we can see that these two sentences show association, right? And bees, unaware of these deliberations, have continued to flit from flower to flower, and translators continue to translate. So again, this will be a statement that will definitely bring the discussion to conclusion. Now, this will be the opening statement that helps us about the context, right? So this will be an opening, this would be a conclusion. E and C becomes the mandatory pair, but B we are not finding any position to fix, so this will be the odd one out sentence, right? So I'm sure we are sorted both with the arrangement and how did we follow the approach to pick the odd one out. So let's move to the next question. Try this. I'm going to give you a minute and then we are going to discuss this. So let's try and see how do we reach to the right answer. People who study children languages spend a lot of time watching how babies react to the speech they hear around them. Okay. They make films of so it's how they react, right? They are spending a lot of time watching. Okay. They make films of adults and babies interacting. So this is for the people who are studying children's language. So A and B definitely looks associated. Let's read the entire statement before we jump to the conclusion. Excuse me. They make films of adults and babies interacting and examine them very carefully to see whether the babies show any signs of understanding what the adults say. So they are recording and then starting with. Okay. They believe that babies begin to react to language from the very moment they are born. So it's how they are interacting, it's how they're responding. Okay. Let's further see how the discussion progresses. Sometimes the signs are subtle, slight movement of the baby's eyes or the head of the hands, how they are examining, right? What are the signs that they are showing? So again, B and D, sorry, definitely shows the association, and A and B we have already reached to this conclusion. Yes, they are related. You would never notice them if you were just sitting with a child, but by watching a recording over and again, you can spot. So again, signs and how react to the speech. But at what time do they start reacting? So the time is not the point of contention, right? So if you will clearly see, E and B becomes a definite set, and B and D also is showing association. E also goes in the same chain, helping to make a cohesive paragraph. But then we are not finding an appropriate place to fit C, and hence C would be the right answer. Right? So I hope we are sorted here. Let's move to the next question. Try this. I'll give you a minute and then we are going to discuss. So let's discuss. Now, neuroscientists have just begun studying exercises impact within brain cells on the genes themselves. Okay. E- Even there in the roots of biology, they have found signs of body's influence on the mind. Okay, so studying the exercise impact within brain cells. So here, body's influence on mind. The discussion is in rhythm. It turns out moving our muscles produces proteins that travel through the bloodstream and into the brain, where they play pivotal. Pivotal means vital, important, right? Notable role in the mechanism of our highest thought processes. Again, you'll see the impact of exercise on our mind. So again, intertwined. Now come to D. In today's technology-driven plasma screened in world, it's easy to forget that we are born movers, animals, in fact, because we've engineered movement right out of our lives. This is talking about more of movement, right? So this doesn't go with the overall idea that's running with the first three sentences. That's the impact of exercise on the brain. So D looks like not fitting in. We can just mark it, but of course we'll take a final call uh, once we see that what is E trying to convey. It's only in the past few years that neuroscientists have begun to describe these factors and how they work, and each new discovery adds or inspiring depth to the picture. So, neuroscientists, right? Neuroscientists have begun the discussion. And how they work, how is the examination happening, how is the study happening. So of course E is also showing association with the research of neuroscientists, exercising impact over the brain. So even E looks associated, but the movement of the person or the human being is, if you are able to understand, is not fitting in the context, right? So you have to pick an answer that definitely would be D, right? I hope it makes sense. So you can take another minute, solve it, and try to rearrange the rest of the sentences. We know D will not fit in. Try to arrange A, B, C, and E. Try to arrange A, B, C, E. I'll give you another minute. Take it as a para jumble question, and then we are going to discuss that what would be the right way to rearrange. So as you can see, the way the sentences are presented, that would be the right combination, right? So let's move to the next question. Please try this and then we are going to discuss. So let's begin the discussion. The water that made up ancient lakes and perhaps an ocean was lost. Okay, let's read the further sentences. Particles from sun collided with molecules in the atmosphere, knocking them into space or giving them an electric charge that caused them to be swept away by the solar wind. Let's read the rest of the statements. Most of the planet's remaining water is now frozen or buried, but clues over the past decade suggest that some liquid water, a presumed necessity for life, might survive in underground aquifers. Okay. Data from NASA's Maven orbiter show that solar storms stripped away most of Mars' once thick atmosphere. Right? So if you will see how that's probably BNC explaining, a recent study revealed that how Mars lost much of its early water while another indicates that some liquid water remains. So this is how solar storm stripped away the Mars. So this looks like broader statement. Now how particles collided with molecules in the atmosphere. Now what is happening to the remaining water? And so if you are able to see, D, E, and B and C are basically talking about that what has happened to Mars and how the solar storm has tipped away the Mars once thick atmosphere and what is happening there. However, the water that made up ancient lakes and perhaps an ocean was lost. So this is irrelevant to the context because then anyways it's not showing that we are talking about Mars here, right? So the most irrelevant sentence in the context would be the first one, right? So please reread it again and get reinsured that A would be the answer. Always make it a habit. If you are not reaching to the right answer and the trainer has explained it to you, please solve it once again for your own self to understand the things written at the right place. Let's try the next question. So let's see, how do you find the odd one out? Take a minute and try this, and then we are going to discuss. So let's try. As India looks to increase the number of cities, our urban planning must factor in potential natural disasters and work out contingencies in advance. Okay. Authorities must revise data and upgrade infrastructure, and mitigation is to lessen. Okay, mitigate is to lessen, even if their local area hasn't been visited by natural calamity as yet. So looks related, right? So these two look related. Extreme temperature, droughts, and forest fires have more than doubled since 1980. So this is a trend. Let's come to D. There is no denying the fact that a baseline normal weather is changing. Okay, so this is again saying that how the disasters are functioning. This is, it's a no longer a question of whether we'll be hit by natural's fury, but rather when. So again, it definitely shows an association. So if you are able to clearly see A, B, and E are something which are exhibited to be associated. Usually the students find it tricky to judge between C and D, that what would be the sentence that will not fit in the context, right? So I'm sure everybody must have come to this conclusion that A, B are and E are definitely related. There's no second thought about it. But to decipher between C and D, which stands odd one out, is slightly difficult, right? So when we say that baseline normal weather is changing, isn't it a broader statement and having justification to fit in the context, or just a trend from 1980, right? So just ponder over over this fact, and clearly then you'll be able to decide that C would be a better choice to pick as the final answer, because that's giving us a generalized picture, and C becomes too specific. So since the context is overall about natural fury happening, and India getting ready for disasters, so C would be a best choice to pick as the odd one out, right? So C would be the correct answer, right? So let's try this question. So we can do two things here. We can also rearrange, and we can also find the odd one out. So I'll give you slightly more time, do both these things: rearrange and pick the odd one out. So let's start the discussion. Our smartphones can now track our diet, our biological cycles, and even our digestive systems and sleep patterns. Researchers have coined a new term, orthosomnia, to describe the insomnia brought on by paying too much attention to smartphones and sleeping tracking apps. So, if you're able to understand, somehow I can see that both these sentences show connection, and rather it forms a mandatory pair, right? Sleep's nature's soft nurse is a blissful, untroubled state, all too easily disturbed by earthly worries or guilt conscious. So, here we're talking about how it disturbs, and both these statements are talking more about smartphones and technology. So this doesn't fit in the context what AB is setting. Let's read further before we take a call. The existence of market for such apps is unsurprising. Shift work along hours work culture and blue light from the screens have conspired to rob many of us of sufficient rest. That's actually the irony. A new threat to a good night rest has emerged: smartphones with sleep tracking apps. So clearly, you can see E is a broader statement. So I can definitely reach to this that five will begin the discussion. And then if you will see one and two, we have already established as a mandatory pair. And how this is a sleep tracking app, because a smartphone phone is having it, and this is disturbing a cycle. So 5 1 2 will go hand in hand, right? Now either we pick in the last statement as 3 or 4, right? So this is again talking more about apps, but this is defining how sleep is and how earthly pressures are making us sleep deprived. So of course C is something which goes off track the discussion. So we can have the correct combination go as 5 1 2 4, and we pick C as the odd one out combination, right? So I hope you really enjoyed the session, you found the session useful. See, these are tricky questions, and most of the questions that we have done have been previously tested. More importantly, these questions find prominence in CAT, and to tell you, all these questions were previously tested. So please do keep working hard. You are already aware of the difficulty level, you know the strategies. Now work hard. How do we work hard? That we have already dealt in detail. And don't forget, consistency is the key. Watch the space for more videos and do help us spread the word. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please take care. All the best. Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing